A widowed millionaire witnessed the shocking act of a waitress, breastfeeding his son. His next decision turned all fates upside down. The piercing cries of an infant slashed through the night, like a sharp blade tearing apart the deadly silence of the cold granite walls. For over 3 hours, that desperate sound echoed through the luxurious hallways, crawled up the gleaming walnut staircase, and turned the mansion into a prison of grief and secrets. At 25, she bent over, polishing wine glasses beneath the crystal chandelier, every movement slow, as though trying to hide her pain. Her hands, roughened by long shifts at a Brooklyn café, clenched the cloth tightly, but her chest tightened each time the cries of Lucas, the 3-month-old baby, drifted down from upstairs. 6 weeks ago, Elena had lost her newborn son, a tiny soul who had only just opened his eyes to the light before leaving her forever. Since then, every child's cry felt like an icy dagger twisting into wounds that had never healed in her heart. Tonight, Lucas's cries, lasting more than 3 hours, were like a curse awakening every pain she had tried to bury. "The baby will exhaust himself," Elena whispered. Her voice choked, yet her hands pressed harder against the cloth, as if scrubbing could drown out the unbearable reality. Upstairs, Lucas Hayes lay in his crib, his face flushed with fever, lips cracked and parched, feebly searching for the milk he could not reach. Beside the crib, a bottle of formula long spoiled sat abandoned, filling the stifling room with a sour stench. Victoria Lang, the 9-year-old waitress hired from a prestigious New York event company, had disappeared 6 hours earlier, promising to buy the special formula for Lucas. In truth, Victoria was wandering along Fifth Avenue, laughing carelessly with friends, her hands laden with glittering designer bags, indifferent to the child she was paid to care for. To her, this job was merely an easy way to make money in Manhattan's glamorous world. Meanwhile, behind the closed walnut doors on the first floor, Alexander Hayes, 37, sat in his study, eyes sunken from endless sleepless nights. As the CEO of a tech empire dominating Silicon Valley, he bore a hardened look, the deep shadows under his eyes impossible to hide despite countless cups of strong espresso. For over 2 hours, he had been trapped in a tense online meeting with investors from San Francisco, the dry numbers and charts constantly interrupted by Lucas's unrelenting cries. "Mr. Hayes, have we finalized the investment yet?" a voice asked through the screen. "Of course you can trust us," Alexander replied mechanically, his gaze drifting toward the photograph of Rebecca, his late wife, on the desk. Rebecca, with her radiant smile forever frozen in that frame, had died giving birth to Lucas, leaving Alexander and his son in an empty world. Lucas's cries, each weaker and more ragged, had grown so fragile they sounded like an alarm. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, every sound like a plea stabbing directly into her soul. She slammed the cloth onto the counter, unable to bear another moment. Her footsteps thundered up the gleaming staircase, trembling hands gripping the icy banister. "Dear God, please don't let the baby slip away," she whispered through ragged breaths. The bedroom door flew open. The sight before her drained the blood from her face. Lucas lay limp in his crib, eyes shut tight, his tiny body burning like glowing embers, his breathing shallow and broken. His lips quivered, desperately searching for life, but finding only emptiness. "Oh God," Elena muttered, rushing forward, scooping the child into her trembling arms. Lucas's body was drenched in sweat, radiating unnatural heat. The sour stench of spoiled milk from the bottle on the dresser made her grimace in disgust. The baby writhed weakly, his mouth clamped shut, as if begging for a miracle. She had lost everything, but this cry would change the fate of all 3 of them. All right, before you sit down, take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly resonate with what I'm sharing. And don't forget to leave a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. Lucas's cries, sharp as a blade slicing through the night, still echoed through the Upper East Side mansion, turning its lavish space into a prison of sorrow. Elena Ramirez, standing before the nursery door that had just swung open, felt the blood drain from her veins. Lucas lay motionless in the crib, his fever-flushed face, cracked dry lips quivering faintly like a withered flower pleading for its final drop of water. His tiny body burned hot, drenched in sweat, radiating an unnatural warmth like smoldering embers. The sour stench from the spoiled bottle of milk on the bedside table stung Elena's nose, making her grimace in disgust. The bottle, forgotten for hours under Manhattan's oppressive heat, had become a symbol of the neglect Lucas was forced to endure. Elena's heart pounded furiously, each beat like a command rising from the depths of her soul. She, a waitress from Brooklyn, had no right to enter this world, where cold granite walls and crystal chandeliers judged her every move. Yet Lucas's cries now weakened into faint, perilous whimpers, like a final plea for help stirred the maternal instinct she had buried. 6 weeks earlier, she had lost her newborn son, and every drop of milk still flowing from her body was a cruel reminder of emptiness. She had prayed, taken medication to suppress it, but the milk persisted, as though fate itself had been preparing her for this very moment. With no time left to think, Elena rushed forward, scooping Lucas into her trembling arms. His body felt weightless, fragile as a dry leaf, but the way he writhed weakly, mouth quivering in search of life, shattered her heart. A primal fire ignited within her, burning away every social boundary, every fear of consequence. She collapsed into the soft leather chair by the window, where light from Central Park slipped through silk curtains, wrapping them in a gentle, almost sacred glow. Trembling, Elena unbuttoned her blouse, pulling Lucas close, letting the milk she had once cursed become a miracle of salvation. The moment Lucas's lips touched her, his cries fell silent, as if the world had suddenly returned to peace. The baby clung to her, drinking greedily with the desperation of a soul grasping at life. His tiny hands clutched her blouse tightly, as though terrified this source of life might vanish. Tears streamed down Elena's cheeks, not from sorrow but from the fragile peace touching her for the first time in 6 weeks of living in hell. In that instant she forgot she was only a waitress, an outsider in this opulent mansion. She forgot the judging eyes of Manhattan's high society, forgot even Alexander Hayes, who could walk in at any moment. There was only her and Lucas, bound by an invisible thread of motherhood. Time seemed to stop. Lucas calmed, his eyelids heavy, slipping into a peaceful sleep. His tiny face, no longer flushed red, bore the serenity of an angel. Elena gazed down at him, her heartbeat slowing, as if she had found a missing piece of herself. But that moment, fragile as the light filtering through the curtains, suddenly shattered when the walnut door creaked open. Alexander Hayes stepped in, his bloodshot eyes widening in shock. The hallway light cast his figure into sharp relief, creating a tableau of contrast, the stillness of Elena and Lucas against the storm of emotion about to erupt. A daring act had just saved a child's life, but would it destroy hers? Alexander stood frozen at the nursery door, his bloodshot eyes wide open, paralyzed by the sight before him. Elena, the waitress from Brooklyn, cradling Lucas in her arms, her blouse unbuttoned, while the baby slept peacefully against her chest. The light from Central Park filtered through the silk curtains, wrapping the two of them in a gentle glow, yet in Alexander's mind, that moment was a deep fissure, splitting him between gratitude and a rising fury. Part of him recognized that Lucas, for the first time in weeks, was no longer wailing in anguish, his tiny face serene like that of an angel. But another part, imprisoned by the suffocating pressure of Manhattan high society, screamed, This waitress had crossed the line, daring to do what only a mother was allowed. He, a widowed millionaire and head of a tech empire, could not allow an outsider like Elena to shatter the boundaries of family reputation. Under the imagined judgmental eyes of his wealthy neighbors, Alexander ordered Elena's immediate dismissal, his voice cold as stone, though his heart trembled with conflict. Elena left the mansion under New York's torrential rain, a small canvas bag on her shoulder, the only possession she carried. The rain soaked through her clothes, biting cold like the venomous whispers already spreading across the Upper East Side. Victoria Lang, the waitress-turned-nanny, returned from Fifth Avenue with her luxury shopping bags and quickly fanned the flames of a vicious rumor. Elena was a deranged woman, haunted by the loss of her child, who dared breastfeed Mr. Hayes's son to fill her emptiness. The rumor spread like wildfire, from afternoon tea parties to elite group chats, transforming Elena into an outcast of society. "A woman like that is dangerous," they whispered, their eyes dripping with contempt. With no references and no money, Elena knocked on the doors of cafes and restaurants from Brooklyn to Queens, but every door slammed shut. The rumor had preceded her, a dark shadow dogging her steps. Her savings drained, she was evicted from her shabby Queens apartment and forced to wander the frigid streets of New York. On the first night, she curled up on a bench in Central Park, the winter wind slicing through her thin clothes, an old newspaper her only blanket. On the second night, beneath the dripping awning of Times Square, she narrowly escaped an attack by three strangers, their sneering smiles making her heart pound in terror. She fled, bare feet splashing through filthy puddles, hiding behind a church wall until the pale dawn broke. By the third night, Elena's body was failing, racking coughs tearing through her chest. An old homeless man, Harold, found her shivering beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, her eyes still holding a fragile flicker of hope. He led her to a group of homeless souls living under the bridge, where cardboard scraps and torn bags served as homes, but sharing and compassion were the rules. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Lucas began crying again, weaker this time, refusing every bottle of milk. Alexander, helpless, felt the pain of losing Rebecca resurface, mingling with a vague guilt about Elena. Doctors warned Lucas was suffering psychological trauma, needing a bond that no one in the house could provide. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or drink a glass of water before continuing to listen, as the story holds even more unexpected turns ahead. Comment 1 if you think this story is captivating, so we know you're still here with us. The storm of emotions ignited by Elena Ramirez's daring act, the waitress who saved Lucas with her own milk, had cast her into the shadows of New York's streets, while the cold granite mansion now drowned in helplessness and regret. Lucas, lying in a crib at New York Presbyterian Hospital, his tiny body trembling, lips turning purple, rejected every bottle that the nurses patiently tried. Alexander, with eyes more hollow and bloodshot than ever, felt the pain of losing Rebecca, his late wife, surge back, mingling with a vague sense of guilt over Elena, the woman he had expelled without hesitation. Inside the mansion, Victoria Lang returned after hours of absence, her hands carrying designer bags from Fifth Avenue, her face glowing with undisguised indifference. She strolled through the gleaming hallways, tossing out a half-hearted apology about being busy buying special formula for Lucas, but her shifty eyes betrayed her unease. Alexander, exhausted after sleepless nights beside his son, no longer had the strength to question her right away. But one afternoon, when he came back from the hospital to collect more clothes for Lucas, a scene in the backyard froze his blood. Under the blazing crimson sunset, Victoria was secretly handing one of Lucas's medications, an expensive drug worth hundreds of dollars, to a strange man. Cash exchanged hands, accompanied by the man's crooked smile, as if they had just completed a filthy transaction. Rage exploded in Alexander. a fire that burned through every shred of restraint. He stormed forward, his tall frame looming over Victoria like a tempest. She jolted in shock, nearly dropping the medicine, her face paling as she realized she had been caught red-handed. No explanation was needed, the truth unfolded like a dark canvas. In her panic, Victoria confessed everything. She had spread the vicious rumor about Elena, branding her a deranged woman obsessed with her lost child, all to cover up her own negligence. She admitted she was jealous of Elena, though just a waitress. She had saved Lucas with a love Victoria could never provide. Worse still, she confessed to stealing Lucas's medicine to sell, a selfish act to fuel her own extravagant lifestyle. The truth struck Alexander like a lightning bolt, shattering every prejudice he had clung to. Elena was not a threat, but a savior who had pulled Lucas back from the brink. Blinded by social pressure and Victoria's lies, he had cast Elena into despair, abandoning her to the icy rains of New York. A torrent of guilt surged through him, tightening around his chest like barbed wire. He stood motionless in the darkened living room, the glow from Central Park's street lamps casting shadows across his worn face, where silent tears streamed down. The image of Elena walking away in the rain, her small canvas bag on her shoulder, carved itself into his memory like a scar that would never heal. At the hospital, Lucas's condition worsened. The doctors, their faces grim, warned that the child was suffering deep psychological trauma, not only from malnutrition but from the loss of emotional attachment. Only someone he trusts can save him, one doctor said, his gaze heavy with meaning. Alexander's mind spun, Elena's name echoing like a desperate plea. He realized his mistake had not only cast Elena into darkness, but had also placed his son's life in grave danger. Standing over the hospital crib, watching Lucas weaken beneath the dangling IV lines, Alexander whispered, his voice breaking, "I must find her, before it's too late." Determination blazed within him, like a fire illuminating the path ahead, propelling him onto a journey of redemption through New York's frigid streets. The truth had been revealed, but could Alexander find Elena before Lucas slipped away forever? Alexander, with his gaunt face and hollow eyes carved by sleepless nights, began his journey like a lost wanderer in the midst of a storm. He drove his sleek black Bentley through the rain-drenched streets, from dingy cafes in Brooklyn to employment centers in Queens, where weary clerks shook their heads at the mention of Elena Ramirez's name. He knocked on church doors in Harlem, police stations in Midtown, even slums where dim streetlights cast long shadows over huddled figures. "That girl? Nobody knows," a bearded man muttered, his suspicious eyes studying Alexander as though he were a hunter stalking prey. Each slammed door, each rejection was another knife carved deeper into his guilt, turning the image of Elena walking away in the rain, the small canvas bag on her shoulder, into a ghost he could never banish. Rain lashed against the windshield like Alexander's own tears as he steered through Manhattan's dark alleys. The neon glow of Times Square lit his unshaven face, his bloodshot eyes burning from 4 sleepless days. His mind whirled between the fragile image of Lucas in the hospital crib and the memory of Rebecca, his late wife, as if she were accusing him for letting their son fall into danger. He wondered if there was still a chance to make things right, or if fate would rob him of Lucas just as it had taken Rebecca. But then, like a shaft of light piercing through the darkness, a call came from Harold, the old homeless man who had sheltered Elena. His voice, gravelly and wary, revealed that Elena was hiding beneath the Brooklyn Bridge. Yet it came with a chilling warning. If Alexander hurt her again, the homeless community would never forgive him. The car tore through the night, Alexander's heart pounding as if it would burst from his chest. Beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, where moss clung to concrete pillars, the air was knife cold. He staggered through the darkness, the distant glow of streetlights faintly illuminating scraps of cardboard and torn bags that served as shelter for the homeless. And then he saw her, Elena, curled up in the corner like a sparrow with broken wings, a shredded blanket her only shield against the brutal world. Her face was pale, nearly translucent, lips cracked and trembling from hunger and cold. A violent cough racked her frail body, as though she were fighting life itself. Her eyes, once bright with hope, now flickered with only a faint glow, but when they landed on Alexander, they sparked with fear mingled with bitterness. She recoiled, as if bracing for another blow of judgment. Alexander sank to his knees a few steps away, his trembling hands unable to reach out, afraid to shatter what fragile hope remained. His heart splintered, knowing this journey of redemption had only just begun. Beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, he found Elena frail and shivering, but the bitterness in her eyes stood like a wall between them. She agreed to return, not for Alexander, but for Lucas, the baby fighting for his life in the hospital. The car tore through the stormy night, carrying with it a fragile hope, like a small flame flickering against the tempest. New York Presbyterian Hospital loomed under the stark white neon lights, the air heavy with the scent of disinfectant and the steady rhythm of machines. Lucas lay in the hospital crib, his tiny body almost translucent, skin pale, lips purple, eye lines dangling like the fragile strings tethering him to life. Doctors and nurses, their faces grave, watched in silence, as though bracing themselves for the worst. Elena stepped into the room, her trembling feet pressing against the cold tile floor, the tattered blanket still draped over her shoulders as a reminder of her lonely nights. Her eyes fell on Lucas, and her heart, though fractured by loss, pounded hard as if an invisible thread was pulling her toward him. When Elena bent down, her tangled hair brushed against Lucas's face. His tiny eyes fluttered open, a faint flicker of recognition sparking within them. A fragile smile, as delicate as a butterfly's wings, appeared on his lips as if he had been waiting for her all along. Elena gathered Lucas into her arms, her embrace trembling yet firm, like a safe harbor in a raging storm. She drew him closer, letting the milk once cursed for reminding her of the child she had lost become the lifeline for another. In that instant, Lucas's weak whimpers ceased, replaced by the small, determined sounds of survival. He clung to her tightly, drinking greedily, his tiny hands gripping her blouse as if terrified she might vanish. The room fell silent, as though witnessing a miracle. The nurses stood frozen, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and emotion. Alexander stood only a few steps away, his fists clenched, tears streaming down his worn face. He watched Lucas, for the first time in weeks, no longer writhing in pain but resting peacefully in Elena's arms. He realized she had not only saved his son, but had also pulled his own soul back from the abyss of grief and mistakes. The guilt that had once strangled his chest like barbed wire now blended with an overwhelming gratitude. He knew he had to do what was right, not just for Lucas, but for Elena, the woman who had sacrificed everything for a child that wasn't hers. The next day, Alexander held a press conference at the hospital, in front of dozens of cameras and flashing lights. He stood tall, his voice steady though his eyes were red, and declared before all of New York, "Elena Ramirez saved my son's life. Every rumor about her is a lie, and I apologize for the injustice she has endured." His words rang out like a hammer, shattering the poisonous whispers that had spread through the Upper East Side. Victoria Lang, the one who had spread the rumors and stolen Lucas's medicine, was fired immediately and became the target of public scorn. Elena's honor was restored, but she kept her distance from Alexander. Her gaze remained fixed on Lucas, as though he was the sole reason for her existence. Her heart, though broken, still beat for the child, but the wound left by Alexander's judgment and society's condemnation continued to bleed. A miracle had happened, but could Elena's forgiveness ever wash away the darkness of the past? The miracle at New York Presbyterian Hospital, where Elena saved Lucas with her love and her milk, shook all of Manhattan, shattering lies and restoring her honor. Yet Elena's heart, though it beat for Lucas, still bore scars from the harsh judgment of society and the mistakes of Alexander Hayes. In the cold granite mansion, once a prison of sorrow, warm light began to seep through like a promise of healing and hope. After a month of fighting, Lucas was discharged from the hospital, his cheeks rosy and his eyes shining bright, like a flower blooming after a storm. Elena, no longer the waitress from Brooklyn, returned to the mansion, but not as a servant. Alexander gave her a room of her own and treated her with a respect he had not shown anyone since Rebecca's passing. He changed, spending more time at home changing Lucas's diapers himself, feeding him spoon by spoon, and sharing small, tender moments with Elena. On peaceful evenings, they sat together in the living room, the crystal chandelier casting light over the marble floor, while Lucas slept soundly on the sofa, his steady breathing like a melody of healing. Each time Elena's and Alexander's hands brushed as they held Lucas, a warm current surged through them, as if fate was weaving together broken threads. But Elena kept her distance. Her heart was a fortress built from old wounds. She feared that this closeness was only an illusion, that Manhattan's elite would once again judge her as they had before. Alexander, sensing the invisible wall, did not push, but chose instead to prove himself through actions. He declined lavish parties, ignored the curious stares of neighbors, and focused on building a home for Lucas, and, he hoped, for Elena as well. Each smile from Lucas, each time his tiny hands reached out to hug her, melted the ice within Elena's heart, like spring sunlight dissolving snow. One weekend afternoon, Alexander took Elena and Lucas to Central Park, the very place where she had once curled up on a bench beneath the freezing rain. But this time, instead of an old newspaper in despair, there was a picnic blanket spread over the grass, a basket filled with fragrant pastries, and Lucas's laughter ringing as he tottered on unsteady legs. The golden sunset bathed the three of them in radiant light, like a painting of simple happiness. With eyes gentler than ever, Alexander quietly pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He knelt before Elena, opening it to reveal a ring that glittered like a star in the New York sky. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from a love that had taken root silently through months of pain. Elena froze, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from sorrow, but from an overwhelming surge of emotion, waves crashing in her chest. She remembered the child she had lost, the nights she cried alone, the milk that had flowed in vain like a curse. But Lucas, with his tiny arms wrapped around her, and Alexander, with his earnest gaze, had given her a second chance. She touched his hand, her fingers trembling, as if reaching toward a future she had once never dared to dream of. Beneath the star-filled sky of Central Park, Alexander slid the ring onto her finger, and Lucas, as if sensing the sacred moment, babbled joyfully, clinging tightly to them both. They became a family not only through love, but through sacrifice and forgiveness that had triumphed over every prejudice. Elena's scars remained, but they no longer defined her. Their message resonated. Family is not only blood, but hearts beating in unison, ready to heal one another in a world full of judgment. From the cold streets of New York to the miracle in Elena's arms, the story of her, Lucas, and Alexander stands as proof that love and forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. No matter how harsh society's judgment, no matter how overwhelming the pain seemed, it was silent sacrifice and quiet courage that wove together a family bound not only by blood but by the heart. The lesson is clear. Listen to your heart, believe in kindness, and never let prejudice blind you to the truth. Each of us has a second chance to right our mistakes and build relationships that endure. Thank you to everyone in the United States for following this moving story. If you shed a tear or found hope here, Leave a comment below right now, share your feelings, or tell us your own story of forgiveness and compassion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and share this video on Facebook, Twitter, or anywhere else to spread the message of healing. We read every comment at 8 p.m. each day. So let us know what you think.